Now let's talk about the man formerly known as Prince Andrew, that is, now just Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, who has been stripped of his Prince title and is being forced out of the Royal Lodge. Of course, it comes weeks after it was announced that King Charles's younger brother would no longer use his Duke of York title.
Was this the moment the royal family finally broke their silence on Prince Andrew? Or was it something far more heartbreaking? Just moments ago, reports began flooding in that the palace had released a deeply emotional statement.
We've just got some breaking news in from Buckingham Palace, folks, and it relates to Prince Andrew, who will now be no longer known as a prince. So this statement has just come in from Buckingham Palace, and I'll read it for you.
One that has already left the nation in disbelief. There were no grand fanfares, no staged appearances, only silence and sorrow echoing through the palace halls. For years, the Duke of York's name has been tied to controversy and isolation. But no one expected this. Those close to the palace say the announcement wasn't planned. For today, it was forced by something sudden, something personal. And as journalists rushed to confirm the story, royal watchers couldn't help but notice one chilling detail. The tone of the message felt final. What could have happened behind those closed doors that led the monarchy to speak out now? And why does the statement sound like a goodbye more than a clarification? Stay with us, because what we've uncovered in the last few minutes changes everything about Prince Andrew's future and the royal family's next move. The sudden silence. Before the announcement, something strange began to unfold inside the palace. Something subtle, almost invisible to the outside world, yet impossible to ignore for those who paid attention. For weeks, royal watchers sensed a shift. Official updates about Prince Andrew, which had once appeared routinely on royal schedules, began to vanish one by one.
Besides, and he's going to, as you said, no longer live in Windsor, but in a sort of internal exile, in some sort of property on the Sandringham estate.
Events he was expected to attend quietly disappeared from calendars. Mentions of his presence at private gatherings were suddenly scrubbed from official reports. The palace, known for its rhythm and precision, seemed out of tune. Even longtime staff members, who usually moved with confidence and grace, carried a nervous energy. They spoke in hushed tones, their glances sharp and cautious. The Royal Communications Office, famous for swift and polished responses, had gone silent. No press releases, no gentle reassurances. It was as though the palace itself had turned to stone. Inside the gilded corridors, whispers replaced footsteps. The scent of polished wood and old books mixed with tension so thick it could almost be felt in the air. One aide reportedly refused to make eye contact with journalists outside the gates. Another was seen leaving early, her expression pale, eyes swollen as if she had been crying. Something was wrong, deeply wrong. By noon, the unease had reached the public eye. Photographers stationed outside Windsor noticed odd movements, cars arriving without royal flags, security personnel changing positions, and the tall windows of Royal Lodge covered completely with heavy curtains. Even the usually friendly groundskeepers avoided speaking to reporters. The air around the estate felt heavier than usual, as though everyone was waiting for something they couldn't quite name. Across social media, speculation grew. Some wondered if Prince Andrew had fallen ill, while others believed the royal family was preparing for a major decision that would affect his standing permanently. Yet no one could confirm anything. The silence from the palace was deafening, and in that quiet, imagination ran wild. But this wasn't the usual kind of royal silence, the type meant to control narratives or protect privacy. No, this was different. This silence felt raw, unplanned, and filled with emotion. It wasn't smooth or strategic. It was the kind that carries sorrow. Even journalists, used to sensational headlines, found themselves lowering their voices when discussing it live on air. By early evening, a chill swept through the palace grounds as the sky dimmed. Reporters clutched their coats tighter, their cameras ready, knowing something was coming. The kind of news that doesn't arrive with fanfare but with heartbreak. For those who have followed the royal family for decades, the signs were unmistakable. The monarchy, built on routine and order, only breaks pattern when something extraordinary happens. And this time, the pattern had shattered completely. Everyone knew it when the silence finally ended. It wouldn't just be another headline. It would be the beginning of a storm that the palace couldn't contain. The hidden struggle. To the world, Prince Andrew's life has always been one of contradiction, a prince by birth, yet a man constantly haunted by his choices. On the surface, he was royalty, polished uniforms, state dinners, and the confidence of a man who once walked beside world leaders. But behind those palace walls, the image of privilege began to crack, revealing something far more human, a man burdened by regret, searching for a sense of purpose he could no longer find. After being removed from public duties, his world grew smaller.
He's now initiated a formal process to remove the style, titles, and honors of Prince Andrew. Of course, it comes in response to his relationship with trafficker Jeffrey Epstein. Buckingham Palace saying that Andrew will now go by the name of Andrew Mountbatten Windsor.
The laughter and movement that once filled his home at Royal Lodge faded into long, quiet days. The staff who remained described the stillness as unsettling a silence that hung heavy in every room. He would spend mornings walking his dogs through the fog-drenched gardens, hands tucked in his coat pockets, his eyes fixed on the ground. Neighbors occasionally waved, but he rarely responded. It was as though his mind was somewhere else, entirely lost between the past and the impossible hope of forgiveness. Insiders revealed that much of his time was spent in his study, surrounded by old photographs and letters. He was said to write endlessly long handwritten notes that were never mailed, addressed to people he'd once been close to. Some were to his family, others to friends who had quietly distanced themselves over the years. The letters, according to one aide, were his way of talking to people who no longer listened. There were days when he tried to keep routine, following old habits from his time in service, rising early, exercising, keeping order in his personal affairs. But there were other days when he wouldn't leave his study at all. The curtains would stay closed until nightfall, and the only sign of life was the faint sound of classical music echoing through the halls. It was hard to imagine that this man was once the Queen's pride, her daring son, the action prince, as the press once called him. He had served in the Royal Navy, flown missions during the Falklands War, and carried the energy of someone destined to do great things. But as the years passed, that image dissolved, replaced by the weight of scandal and silence.
Duke of York would no longer be known that way. He would only be known as Prince Andrew, of course, the son of the late Queen Elizabeth II. But we do have this breaking news from Buckingham Palace that he will lose the prince title. And at the time, just a couple of weeks ago when we were speaking about this,
the loss of royal duties didn't just strip him of title, it took away his identity. Yet, there had been whispers of hope in recent months. Friends hinted that he was trying to make peace within the family, reconnecting quietly with Princess Anne, and even exchanging cordial messages with Prince William. For a brief moment, it seemed like he might be finding his way back into the fold, not as a public figure, but as a brother, a father, and a son trying to heal old wounds. But when the palace statement was released, that fragile hope collapsed. The words felt final cold, yet sorrowful. Whatever had happened, it marked an ending, the kind that closes not just a chapter, but an entire story. And for Prince Andrew, that story had always been one of struggle, solitude, and the haunting search for redemption that now seemed forever out of reach. Behind palace walls, while the public waited in confusion, the atmosphere inside Buckingham Palace was nothing short of suffocating. The air itself seemed to carry the weight of something unsaid, something heavy, irreversible. Senior staff were instructed to maintain complete discretion, and even the most experienced courtiers could sense that this was not the usual kind of royal crisis. Security personnel were repositioned around specific royal residences, and movement inside the palace became restricted. Every whisper felt monitored. Every phone call was hushed. Normally, the palace corridors echoed with the soft shuffle of polished shoes, the clinking of china, and the faint laughter of aides discussing schedules or upcoming engagements. But that day, silence reigned. It wasn't the calm before a ceremony, it was the kind that follows devastating news. According to sources later quoted by The Guardian and The Telegraph, an emergency family meeting had been called at Windsor that very morning. The timing was so abrupt that some advisors were reportedly caught off guard. Only a handful of senior royals were invited: King Charles, Queen Camilla, Prince William, and Princess Anne. It was a circle deliberately small, chosen not for tradition, but for trust. Catherine, the Princess of Wales, still recovering from her recent health struggles, was informed privately through a personal call from the king himself. What exactly was said in that room remains one of the most closely guarded secrets of the modern monarchy. But insiders familiar with palace dynamics hinted that emotions ran high. It wasn't a debate, it was a reckoning. One source told Global News in an off-record briefing. The conversation, though brief, was laden with emotion, regret, and an unspoken acknowledgement that something had gone too far to fix. Prince William reportedly kept a somber tone throughout the meeting. While he has long been known for his composure, those present noticed a rare flash of frustration, a mix of sorrow and disbelief. Queen Camilla, on the other hand, remained quiet, occasionally glancing toward her husband, whose face bore the unmistakable exhaustion of a man torn between family loyalty and royal duty. Princess Anne, always the pragmatist, was said to have offered a few sharp but compassionate words, reminding everyone that decisions made in moments like these define how history remembers them. Outside that room, the palace staff continued their duties under a veil of unease. Assistants avoided eye contact, and senior aides exchanged brief nods as if acknowledging that something monumental had happened, yet none dared to ask what. The energy inside the palace was different. It was as though centuries of protocol and discipline were trying to contain a wave of emotion too big to hide. By mid-afternoon, several black cars were seen entering the rear courtyard of Clarence House. Within them were private secretaries and communications officials, a sign that whatever decision had been made, it required an immediate public response. One palace insider described seeing a sealed envelope being handed to a royal messenger. It bore the unmistakable crimson wax seal of the sovereign, the mark of a statement that would change everything. By the time the sun began to sink behind the palace gates, several aides were spotted leaving the premises, some with tear-streaked faces, others visibly shaken. According to a BBC correspondent stationed nearby, the mood outside had turned from curious to anxious. Reporters refreshed their feeds relentlessly, awaiting the official release. And then, just as the evening light faded, the palace issued its statement. It was short, dignified, and devastating. The world would soon know that something inside those ancient walls had changed forever, and for Prince Andrew, there would be no going back. The moment the news broke. At exactly 3:07 p.m., the digital world seemed to pause. The official royal family account on X, formerly Twitter, released a statement that would ripple through every corner of the globe. The post was simple, just a few lines, written in the formal, measured tone that Buckingham Palace was known for. Yet behind those carefully chosen words lay a heartbreak that shook even the most hardened royal watchers. It is with deep sorrow that we share news regarding His Royal Highness, the Duke of York. No further explanation. No follow-up line. Just that. Within seconds, phones began to buzz, televisions switched to breaking coverage, and social media feeds exploded. The world had waited years for a royal announcement like this. But when it came, it didn't feel like closure. It felt like loss. Major outlets like BBC, Sky News, and The Guardian interrupted regular programming. Anchors' voices softened as they read the statement live, their expressions mirroring the nation's confusion and grief. "This is deeply significant," one anchor whispered. "We've not seen a message like this from the palace in decades." In an instant, hashtags like hashtag Duke of York and hashtag Buckingham Palace statement began trending worldwide. On YouTube, live streams outside the palace drew hundreds of thousands of viewers, all waiting for clarification. Some commenters prayed, others speculated. The uncertainty only deepened the tension. For the public, the shock wasn't just about the message itself, it was the silence that followed. The palace's communications team didn't respond to press inquiries. No senior royal appeared before cameras. It was as if the monarchy had collectively exhaled and disappeared behind its ancient walls. Outside Buckingham Palace, crowds began to gather within the hour. What had started as a handful of curious tourists soon became a sea of faces pressed against the black iron gates. Some held their phones up, recording every moment. Others simply stood there, motionless. The usual buzz of laughter, camera clicks, and flag-waving children was replaced by an uneasy stillness. A few people placed flowers near the gateposts. Lilies, white roses, and a single envelope marked, "Thank you, sir." One onlooker told ITV News, "You could feel it, something had ended." Even the guards looked different, like they were part of the silence. Across London, landmarks dimmed their lights. Westminster Abbey's bells tolled softly as the evening drew in. Even the London Eye turned a muted royal purple, a quiet tribute to a prince who had lived a complicated life beneath a merciless spotlight. In Windsor, the mood was even heavier. Local reporters described an eerie calm around Royal Lodge, Andrew's longtime residence. Not a single car came or went after the announcement, one journalist told The Telegraph. Only one light was visible upstairs, in the corner room that overlooks the gardens. Neighbors later said that the light stayed on until well past dawn. Some believed it was Princess Beatrice or Eugenie inside, sitting quietly, too heartbroken to sleep. Others thought it might have been Andrew himself, reflecting, remembering, perhaps realizing that the last threads of royal privilege had finally slipped away. In York, church bells rang at St. Olave's, his namesake parish, while small gatherings lit candles in remembrance. Though no official confirmation had yet clarified what had happened, illness, resignation, or something far more tragic, people instinctively sensed that this was final. For millions watching around the world, this wasn't just another royal headline. It was the end of an era, the closing chapter of a story that began with grandeur, descended into scandal, and concluded in silence. Even as journalists speculated and the internet swirled with theories, one truth remained constant. Those 16 words from the palace had changed everything. What comes next? The announcement has left the world suspended between grief and confusion. Instead of clarity, it has opened a new maze of questions, each more haunting than the last. What exactly happened behind those palace walls? Will the royal family address the whispers, or will this become yet another secret buried beneath layers of royal discretion? Historically, the monarchy has thrived on silence. Its power has always come from what is not said, from the gaps that the public fills with imagination. But this time feels different. The air carries the weight of finality, of something that cannot simply be brushed aside with formal statements or polished photographs. Even seasoned royal correspondents admitted that this announcement carried an unfamiliar tone, intimate, vulnerable, almost human. For many observers, this feels like a turning point. Some insiders believe that this marks the quiet beginning of transition within the monarchy, a signal that the family is preparing to move forward, even if it means letting go of a deeply troubled past. Prince Andrew's withdrawal from public life had already redrawn the royal landscape. But now, this feels absolute, as though the palace is closing the final door on his chapter once and for all. Still, others see something broader at play, a reckoning not only for Andrew, but for the very idea of royal infallibility. The monarchy, for centuries, has been a symbol of strength and endurance. Yet moments like this expose its fragility. They remind the world that beneath the crowns and ceremonies are human beings, parents, siblings, and children who make mistakes, carry guilt, and face consequences. The statement's echo has forced even the most loyal royalists to confront uncomfortable truths about legacy and forgiveness. Can redemption exist in an institution built on perfection? Can the public ever separate the man from the monarchy? Those are the questions now being debated across newsrooms, living rooms, and social media feeds alike. And yet, amid all this uncertainty, one image lingers the dimming palace lights as dusk settles over London. Somewhere inside those walls, decisions are still being made, tears perhaps still being shed. The world waits for the next dawn, unsure whether it will bring answers, healing, or simply more silence. And so, as Buckingham Palace stands under a quiet sky tonight, one truth echoes louder than any royal announcement even the mightiest families cannot escape heartbreak. The royal family's latest statement about Prince Andrew has reminded the world that behind those grand walls are hearts that break, just like ours. This isn't the kind of news that ends with answers. It's the kind that lingers in whispers, in memories, in what might have been. Whether this marks the end of Andrew's royal chapter or simply another beginning shrouded in mystery, one thing is clear. The silence from the palace speaks volumes. History will remember this day, not for ceremony or crowns, but for the emotion that crossed an entire kingdom in minutes. If this story touched you as deeply as it did us, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because the truth behind royal life is often more fragile than it appears. Stay tuned as we continue uncovering the stories that the palace won't say out loud, but the world deserves to hear.